The figure known as the Buddha is one of the most influential in human history, a spiritual teacher whose ideas shaped civilizations across Asia and continue to resonate worldwide today. Yet a profound question remains: did the Buddha truly walk the earth, or is his story a legend shaped by myth and memory? Some argue he was as real as any historical king or priest, while others suggest the figure we know might have been shaped through centuries of retelling, exaggeration, and invention. Could the Buddha have been a historical man whose life slowly transformed into something larger than life? Or was he a figure of pure philosophy, conceived not by an individual, but by a movement that needed a founding voice? These are the mysteries that still surround the life of Siddhartha Gautama, the one later called the Buddha. The teachings attributed to the Buddha emerged in northern India during the 6th and 5th centuries BC, an era historians often call the Axial Age. This was a transformative period in world history. In Greece, philosophers like Pythagoras and Heraclitus questioned the nature of reality. In China, Confucius began to lay out a system of ethics and governance. In India itself, religious life was dominated by Brahmanical ritual, led by priests who emphasized complex sacrifices and strict hierarchies. Against this backdrop, new movements appeared, challenging traditional authority and searching for deeper truths. It was in this environment, according to tradition, that Siddhartha Gautama was born. According to Buddhist tradition, Siddhartha Gautama was born a prince around 560 BC in a kingdom along the Himalayan foothills, in present-day Nepal. His father, King Shuddhodana, supposedly shielded him from all suffering, raising Siddhartha in luxury. Yet legends say that once the young prince ventured beyond the palace gates, he saw the realities of sickness, old age, and death. Disturbed by these encounters, he left behind his royal life to seek answers as a wandering ascetic. After years of harsh practices, he discovered that extreme deprivation did not bring enlightenment any more than indulgence. Sitting under a Bodhi tree, he is said to have attained awakening, realizing the truths that became Buddhism's foundation: that all life is marked by suffering, that suffering has causes, and that liberation is possible through ethical living, meditation, and wisdom. In time, Siddhartha became the Buddha, the awakened one, traveling northern India to teach followers until his death in his 80s. A compelling story, yet how much of it is history and how much is legend remains debated. One of the greatest challenges in verifying the Buddha's historical existence comes from the nature of the sources. The earliest records of his life and words were not written down until centuries after his death. Oral traditions carried his teachings across generations before they were recorded in texts. The oldest surviving Buddhist scriptures, grouped in collections called the Pali Canon, were likely written in Sri Lanka around the 1st century BC, over 300 years after the Buddha's supposed lifetime. By this time, countless stories, parables, and miracles had already been woven into his biography. This delay makes it difficult for historians to separate fact from devotion. Unlike figures such as Alexander the Great, whose campaigns were documented by contemporaries, the Buddha left no inscriptions or artifacts directly tied to him. The first tangible evidence related to the Buddha's life appears not during his own time, but in the era of Emperor Ashoka, who ruled much of India in the 3rd century BC. Ashoka is known for his rock and pillar edicts, inscriptions carved in stone across the empire promoting Buddhist values of compassion and tolerance. Some inscriptions refer to places said to be connected with the Buddha's life, such as Lumbini, the traditional site of his birth. Archaeological excavations in Lumbini have identified ancient structures consistent with Ashoka's markers, but no direct evidence proving Siddhartha Gautama's presence. Still, these records confirm that belief in the Buddha as a historical teacher had spread widely just 2 centuries after his supposed death. Historians often ask whether the Buddha can be compared to other religious founders. Figures like Jesus of Nazareth or Confucius also lived in periods when writing was limited, and their words and lives were recorded decades or centuries later. With the Buddha, the gap is particularly wide, but the situation is not unique. Many ancient figures exist for us only through later traditions, yet their historicity is generally accepted. The parallels suggest it is possible that a historical teacher did live, though the details of his life have been shaped through storytelling, symbol, and devotion. The traditional life story of the Buddha is filled with miraculous accounts that raise further questions about history versus myth. Texts describe his conception as a cosmic event, his birth accompanied by celestial signs, and his early years displaying superhuman abilities. Later episodes tell of him defeating Mara, a demon symbolizing desire and fear, while meditating for 49 days without moving. Scholars today interpret many of these accounts as symbolic, teaching tools designed to illustrate Buddhist principles rather than literal events. Just as parables in other religious traditions use narrative to convey moral truths, many scholars believe that much of the Buddha's biography was shaped as a means to express deeper philosophical lessons. Modern historians and scholars of religion tend to classify the Buddha as a historically plausible figure. While it is nearly impossible to prove concrete details of his biography, the consistency of traditions across early Buddhist schools suggests that at the very least, a charismatic teacher named Siddhartha or Gautama existed. The fact that his teachings developed into a coherent movement, spreading rapidly across India and into Central and East Asia, supports the view that his origins lay with a real individual rather than an imagined founder. However, nearly all agree that the surviving stories present a layered mixture of memory, symbolism, and later invention. Regardless of whether every detail of his life is factual, the impact of the Buddha's story has been undeniable. Within a few centuries, Buddhism developed into one of the great world religions, influencing philosophy, art, architecture, and political systems. The legendary image of the Buddha leaving behind wealth and comfort to pursue truth gave millions of followers a model of sacrifice and dedication. Today, archaeologists, linguists, and historians continue to study the origins of these traditions, piecing together fragments of history from inscriptions, artifacts, and texts. The question of whether the Buddha really walked the earth may remain partly unresolved, but the evidence shows that his teachings undeniably did. The figure of the Buddha stands at the crossroads of history and myth. Historians have found enough consistency to believe that Siddhartha Gautama was likely a real man who lived in northern India around the 5th century BC. Yet the details of his life as preserved in tradition reflect centuries of interpretation, symbolism, and religious devotion. Did the man who became the Buddha walk the forests and villages of ancient India? The evidence points toward yes, though filtered through layers of story and legend. What remains most significant is that his vision of human suffering and liberation transformed whole civilizations. Whether remembered with perfect accuracy or not, the Buddha's presence still shapes thought and practice across the globe, suggesting that, in a very real sense, he continues to walk the earth through the lives of those who follow his path.